Okay, so beginning with the writing process, at the beginning of my first semester in college, it was very all over the place. There really wasn't a process, especially when it came to research. But the way my process used to be structured was just looking up a topic and just writing anything that came to mind. Then, when I was done with that, I would go back and kind of just structure whatever I had written. As you can see in this essay, I talk about my dad and then I move on to my brother and then I go back to my dad. So the transitions were very choppy. They weren't well thought out. There wasn't really much of a process happening. But as I came into this class, I began to develop a plan by trying to make a web and putting the topic in the middle, as you can see here. And then I branched out my ideas. So I began with whatever I wanted to talk about. And then I tried to think of audience, whether it be parents or teens, and then why I would want either or. And then I tried to see how I would do the research. And then I would narrow it down to what I actually wanted, and then how I wanted to explain literacy, depending on my audience, which I chose parents. And then I was able to develop this section right here, which I thought since it's for parents, I can use their child to give them examples. And then I talked about, or I thought about how maybe I could write about how it even affects us into college years. So I actually had the time and I put in more effort to plan what sections I wanted to talk about. Moving on to the research process, at the beginning of this class, I didn't really know how to do research, which as you can see in my first draft, which I thought was my final draft, I had about one source. And I didn't really know how to incorporate it. I didn't really know what to do. But later on, as I discovered how to look for sources in my final draft, I actually have two more sources, which led to a total of three. And I also learned in the research process in this class how to ask interview questions. And in the first round, they were very short questions. There wasn't really much discussion. It was just yes or no. Not a lot of space to give me the answers that I really wanted. But as I learned how to ask the proper questions, as in this final interview that I had, more conversation was happening. So the students were able to elaborate and really share their personal experiences with me involving what I was trying to ask. And it was a lot better because I was able to develop my research a lot more thoroughly. And moving on into the last topic, which is integrating secondary sources and writing with authority. When I began, since I only had one source, as you can see here, I only mentioned it once, and the rest of the research paper was written mostly based on opinion. There wasn't really much fact backing it up. As you can see here in this section, I only included this very short sentence. The section was actually very small. So the rest of the paper wasn't really validated through any of my sources. I just kind of used it to explain what literacy was. But once I was taught what to look for when finding the sources, I was able to add two more, as I showed earlier. And a lot more discussion was able to happen on my end. I was able to explain more thoroughly, as you can see here, what literacy is, and I was able to validate actually the rest of my paper. And since I learned how to write a lot better, I was able to identify what kind of or what type of way I needed to explain my sources. And since I was talking to parents, I felt that just validating everything from the get-go, from the very beginning, it was a lot easier and it made my research paper flow a lot more smoother. So those are the things that I learned this semester involving research and writing process and integrating my secondary sources.